Okay, so I just want to welcome you here today, and I am incredibly excited about the guest that I've got today. I met her first of all as a friend sent me her Facebook page and said, "You have got to look at this lady who is the occupationist therapist, and her name is Kelsey Olds." And I looked at her page and I was like, whoa, this is one courageous, gutsy lady talking into things that other people are afraid to talk into. And I have been following her ever since. When I create courses, there's often a lot of what Kelsey has actually put on her pages, which she absolutely gives away for free in my courses, but she also has her own work. And we are going to free fall today, wherever this conversation goes, because I know I've got a way that I want to thank Kelsey with how she has helped me. But I'm really interested to see where it unravels.
Yeah.
So welcome and thank you. So this is a recording for the Golden Thread. And so what I do
Yeah.
with the Golden Thread is I wanted mums and teachers, particularly early teachers, to have options. And I
Mhm.
want them to hear from multiple voices so that they don't have to just listen to the way that they're told and that they know they've got options. And so that's why I wanted you to come on, because you are one gutsy lady, one gutsy lady.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, how did you start?
Well, so I'm actually not sure if your audience is international or mostly New Zealander or where your audience is, but I am, if my accent doesn't give it away, I am from the States. Um and at the time that I started the occupational therapist, I was living in England, but I was working on a US Air Force base. Not as a member of the military myself, but employed to be giving OT services to children of military families who were living there because they have to offer the same services to the military. They can't be like your kids get different services or worse services than anybody in a public school in the U.S. could expect, and so they had to have therapists over there to provide the same services, and it really grew out of in the summer, if you're living in the States then and you're working in a public school, then during the summer then there's no school from like June to August, and so a lot of OTs will go get another part-time job or do something because there's no, if they're a school OT, there's no work in the summer. But because I needed to be staying in England, then I'm still employed. I still have to be in a chair for 8 hours a day, but there's much less for me to need to do by my clinic, and so they asked me to take over their social media. It was the middle of COVID, and they were all tapped out on. They had been trying to make digital resources and stuff like that, and I had been experimenting with making some little YouTube videos for kids who I worked with, and also, so that's kind of like the practical logistical side of things, and then like the emotional or like what's the word I'm trying to think of, the framework or the theoretical side of things is that I really hated feeling like I had things that could help people that I could only give them, that was like hidden behind a paywall, because in the
Yep.
United States you can't get OT unless a pediatrician like refers you. You can't just walk into an OT and say I want OT for my kid. And I felt like I had all of these like common sense solutions, or not even necessarily solutions, but just information for people to have at all. Um and it shouldn't be, some special thing that you can only get if you jump through 50 hoops, but I didn't know how to share it with people. And so I had both time and social media and this kind of like heart or theory or whatever. And so what I was doing was writing stuff for my work social media. But a lot of times the first draft of what I would write was too opinionated, or maybe a little less diplomatic, or maybe said something that I believed really strongly, but maybe did not reflect every single person in my clinic's, personal feelings or beliefs. And so I would write it the way that I thought it, and then I would keep that, and then I would also make a copy and edit it down to be a little bit more public facing from my clinic. And so then I would post the one from the clinic, and then I would post the other from my page.
And I think what I love about you the most, it's more the big stuff. I love how, because that's what people need to hear. And I'm actually
Yeah.
going to come, because it's more, there was something that you wrote, and I'm not sure how recently it was, but it was actually about the real dilemmas that parents have when there's huge behaviors. And there's a
Mm.
PC line that goes with this. And there's actually the reality of when a child is actually in a huge meltdown, and how
Mm-hmm.
a parent, and no one talks about this. And I know I've got parents that go, no one's talking about, and you did. And I'm like, whoa, that was so, it was so gutsy of you. And I do a
Yeah.
literally um uh a webinar on meltdown, and I literally put that next to it, because I want parents to know that it doesn't matter how big things are for anyone,
Yeah.
that they can be seen and they can be heard. But you're the first person I've ever seen write like that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
even I'm learning to have the confidence to write like you write.
Right.
So I'm sort of piggybacking off you at the moment, because I'm like, well, one day I'm going to get this brave. I'm going to get this brave, and I'm starting to get this brave. But I'm learning, and I'm learning watching what you're
Yeah.
doing. So
I appreciate that.
when you wrote this, so again, do you know the one I'm talking about?
I'm thinking it's probably the one that's called Survive, that opens with, it's one of the most common questions that I asked is what do
Yes.
I do when my child is literally in meltdown? Yeah.
So that one, because when I read it, I was like, whoa, no one is speaking about this, and everyone needs to speak
Yeah.
about this. So what was your thoughts behind writing that?
It's been a bit since I wrote that one. And so I honestly don't even remember the exact circumstances or whatever, because we've been through, a zillion meltdowns. But um I do think that so much of the work is not in the moment, right? Like so much of the work is trying to anticipate what your kid needs, figuring out the patterns of what, is making things really, really hard, guessing about what you can change and seeing how it works or doesn't work, and then what you can change the next time and all of that stuff. But I would still get so many questions that are like, okay, but literally in the moment, what do I do though? Like once I've done all this and it hasn't worked, or it didn't help that time, or I couldn't anticipate that thing or whatever, what do I do? And to some extent, there's not like one right answer, right? Like there's not like, well, what you need to do is just this magic thing and this words and just recite them and that just solves it. Like there's no magic thing. Um but like and I also think that people have different maybe even just based on who they are as a person, like somebody might know, okay, if my kid is trying to attack me and hit me and throw stuff at me, and I go to try to fold them into a hug and sit down, then that will not be good for me, and I will not be able to control my own self and my actions. If I put my hands on my children, even intending to put them on them calmly and regulatedly and help protect us both, it will escalate past a point where I can manage that. Like that could be true of a parent and they could still be a good parent and they could know that about themselves. And then another parent might know, like that first parent might rely on, okay, I need to walk away and close a door and put a door between the two of us, and they might be kicking and pounding on the door or whatever, but that's what I need to do. And then another parent might know, whatever, my kid kicked a kid shaped hole through the wall the last time that I did that. So I know that putting a door between us is not actually a strategy that's going to work in our family. What I need to do is something else. And so, like, it might be about you as a person, it might be about your circumstances, it might be about your kid as a kid, it might be about what age or size they are or whatever. Like, there's not one right answer. But I kind of described in my own family that like fold my kid into a hug and sit down exactly where we are at has been a strategy that has worked for like the most dysregulation for most of our life. And I actually feel like we're maybe coming out the other end of that now, because he's kind of grown up to a point where now a lot of it is verbal and a lot less of it is like, I'm going to try to kick a hole in the wall, but it's a lot more like, I'm going to yell all the angriest things that I know, which is growth, even if it's hard. And so there's not a thing like a guidebook about that, that can cover every situation and every person and every range of things. But that was what I was trying to create, regardless, is like the closest thing to a guidebook that I could, while still really strongly acknowledging that whatever you need to do in the moment to survive, because that's why it's the title and that's what it comes back to, is like, listen, this isn't the moment where they're learning. This isn't even really the moment where you're learning. Nobody's learning. Everybody's trying to survive. And then, you'll come out this and then you'll reflect on it and be like, okay, what do I do next time? Or you'll be like, oh, that's right. When that thing happened, that really did set them off, or whatever it is. That's when you'll do reflective learning, not in the moment. In the moment, you just survive, you keep your kids safe, and you keep yourself safe.
And I think that's what I loved about it the most. I loved that there is no right or wrong, that it is different. And I also know there are
Yeah.
so many professionals that would be actually scared to actually talk about that. And that leaves parents helpless.
Yeah.
It leaves them helpless because they feel like they're not good enough, because sometimes it looks messy. And I suppose I'm talking into this because I really want the parents that are with me to feel connected to this conversation, that it doesn't matter where they find themselves, it's actually okay. It's absolutely okay where they find themselves. So, and that particular piece of writing, I haven't seen anyone else do. And I was like, whoa, yeah, this parents need this, because it gives them a starting place, that they are not a failure.
Right.
They are not a failure wherever they find themselves. And therefore,
Yeah.
and again, it's more. So I have you met Alison Davis yet in Australia?
Uh-uh.
No. So again, Alison Davis talks about the meltdown cycle, but she talks
Okay.
about working with the maintenance outside, and that's how I work.
Yeah.
So I work with creating a maintenance plan. I don't work with the meltdown. I work with everything around it, so that
Yeah.
and on what I'm hoping, or what I'm looking for, is that it either gets less frequent or less intensitized. But we
Right.
also talk about the reality of when it does happen, because this is actually real life. And again, I suppose I'm just going on to this because so many people don't start this journey because they're actually afraid of what the journey can actually look like. Or
Yeah.
and by you talking about that, and particularly talking about that so personally, such a key, such a key. So I'm gonna go on to something else, but yeah, I think out of all of your work, that I've worked with some parents that have their children have huge behaviors, and they feel it's
Yeah.
about them, and it's not. And it's not. And
No.
sometimes the safest place is being the most vulnerable, and
Yeah.
just being where they can be in that moment. So again, could you just help as well, just to explain, um, because I understood what you were saying about recognizing from the physical into the verbal, but for other people, what are you seeing when you describe that a child is going from physical behavior to verbal behavior?
Yeah. So the this isn't all of it, but a small example of it is, if you think about an adult reaction to a kid, maybe a teacher is often easier for me to picture than a parent, because school has kind of like different, expectations and stuff like that. So if you picture how a teacher would react to a kid, how a teacher would react to a kid who said, um, I'm going to throw this rock at you, versus how a teacher would react to a kid who threw a rock at them. Like, a lot of times, the adult reaction to both a verbal threat about a potential behavior or misbehavior or bad whatever and the adult reaction to them actually doing it are often like the exact same. Like whether they did it or whether they just threatened to, the adult might react like, how dare you, you know, you don't talk to me that way, of course you don't do that, that's not for throwing, or hands aren't for hitting, or you know better than that, or whatever it is. um and whatever, you know, punishment or consequence or whatever thing being equivalent regardless of whether it was just words about the thing or the actual thing. um and those are not the same brain process. To do a thing on impulse um is very different from um being able to think about the angry impulse in your body, turn it into words, and then try to use the words as a weapon or a negotiating tactic or a bargain or whatever to get something that you want, is a massively more sophisticated, like I don't mean sophisticated in the sense of like good for fancy people in society, but I mean in the literal sense of like how much brain
Yeah.
processing is going on between it's a very very simple brain process to like impulse enters brain, do thing. That's a very very simple process. That's like, you know, one thing tripping in your head, like you got close to me, I pushed you. That there was like one, you know, one smooth process
Yeah.
in there. You got close to me, I thought about pushing you but I didn't, I held it back, and then I turned it into language, and then with my mouth I said, hey, move away from me or I'm going to push you, is really complicated. It involved you withholding what your body's impulse was. It involved you um, thinking about your thinking, metacognition. It involved you thinking about your own thoughts to figure out what it was that you wanted to do, what that impulse was. It involved you identifying the cause of why you felt that way, and then turning that into words so that you could then tell the words to somebody and predict that if you told them the words, it would change their behavior in such a way that you didn't actually have to carry out the threat. That is like, it's not, I'm not trying to say, so we should just let our kids threaten everybody and it's great and whatever. I'm not trying to say that. I am saying that from a brain development perspective, threatening somebody about something is way harder and more complicated and more mature, even, and more sophisticated than just doing the thing is. But the adult reaction to both doesn't take any of that into account, because the adult reaction to both is really about the adult feeling threatened at all. And an adult feels threatened if you kick them, and an adult also feels threatened if you say, I'm going to kick you because I'm mad. Like, so the adult reacts the same way to both. And so when I am working with a kid, they're you know, wherever if it's my own kid, I've known them since birth, but a lot of times when I'm working with a kid in OT, then I'm like coming in at whatever stage they're in at, and so, you know, I haven't known their whole entire history or whatever, and I have to get the grown-ups who have known their whole entire history to recognize anything that they've been able to move from the physical to the verbal is maturity. Anytime that they, because um like just screaming or yelling or swearing or calling names or anything like that does not have a physical impact in the concrete material world the way that everything physical, pushing, kicking, shoving, hitting, etc., all spitting, you know, all those things do have they have a concrete, visible, tangible cause and effect. I push you, you fall over or move. I punch you, you are visibly in pain and hurt, and all of the verbal ones only have to do with social, which is a much more abstract sphere to be operating within. And again, none of that means that it's good, that it's just allowed, that we should just let them, blah, 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 things that people think that I'm saying when I say this. Um, it just means that it is a sign of maturing and
Mm-hmm.
like getting more sophisticated processes. And so that is a good thing to keep building off of, and not just to react to as if it's exactly the same, because
And I yeah. And I asked you because I can see this, but I can also, again, I've seen the adults do exactly what you said and react the
yeah,
same, where I'm like going, we've got progress now, we've got progress, we're not biting now, we're, I don't know. And I wonder actually where you were hissing, because I had a child that went from biting to hissing, and I'm like, and people wanted me to stop the hissing. I'm like, actually, we've moved so much on from the biting. This is a
right,
good thing. This is a good thing. So, and
yeah, no, that
it's
isn't great.
showing the maturity of the brain and the that and I wanted everyone just to relax, because a lot of the time it's the adult stress as well that interplays
Right.
in the situation. And that's why when you said that, it's someone else other than me saying that. And again, I think this is what I want to do, is build up a body of reference of people. We're all saying the same thing, but if
Mm.
parents and teachers can hear us all saying the same thing in different ways, hopefully we'll start to get that confidence and start to support the children with the needs that they actually need. You know, it's more, I've
Right.
left, so Kelsey, I've left early childhood teaching because I really, really struggled with particularly how neurodivergent children were being supported. And I felt that I had
Yeah.
more power being out of the system and saying
Mm.
what I wanted, rather than being constrained by what I was allowed to say. So
Right.
I'm probably the same as you. So when you said about what you could write on the website and what you couldn't, I'm like, yeah, I so get you. I so get. And like,
Yeah.
no, I literally have verbal diarrhea about what I say, because I'm like, there's no one that can actually stop me saying this. So
Right.
this is why I'm asking you the questions that I have, because I want you to, I want
Yeah.
you to say, so that my parents and my teachers can actually hear you. Can I
Right.
can I actually, no, I want to ask you, what is, if you could say anything to a parent or teacher that was struggling, what would you say to them? So there's huge behaviors, they feel
Yeah.
lost, the professionals aren't listening to them. What would you say?
I feel like the thing that I come back to the most, that's maybe like the core of my work, is that um if I was putting it in one blurb, it would be everything people do makes sense. And on its face, that sounds both really general, so maybe not that helpful, and also really like a platitude. Um, but I think that if you can take the if you can take that as if it's true, everything people do makes sense, then it just disqualifies they're doing this for no reason from any of your thinking from there on out. Um, which already takes you quite a ways toward problem solving, even if you get no further than that. Taking they're
Mhm.
doing this for no reason out of your possibility of answers takes you a pretty far way. Um, and
So,
then and then beyond that, there would be a lot of specific nuanced things. I'm working right now on a project about writing about um, the emotional regulation impact of proprioceptive sensory input, because there's so much that people do because um, that they, like, on an instinctual level, they know that doing um, kind of things that are thought of as like big angry like behaviors, like punching stuff, throwing yourself down at the ground and beating on it with your fists and kicking with your legs, or running really far away from whatever it is that's making you upset, or screaming at the top of your lungs, like all of that, like toddler things, all of the instinctual toddler things are like things that are built into human bodies as like regulation mechanisms. And that, again, none of that makes it mean just, everyone can scream at everyone and punch them all the time and, run away. Like, of course you can't have a society that works that way, but it does mean that when people's bodies want to do those things to try to regulate themselves, that it makes sense that they want to do that, because they're just doing a normal human thing to do that. And if I take a little bit of a detour of a branch, when I talk to people about sensory processing stuff, and the fact that everybody all day long is doing things that they're making themselves sensory choices that keep them feeling good, feel good strategies. And everybody all day long is doing zillions of these, because nobody wakes up in the morning and drinks the grossest coffee that they could find at the store out of their least favorite mug and stirs it with the spoon that feels too big, and waits until it's a little bit too cold and then drinks it, and then gets in their car and drives in silence without their favorite music to their work, where they park the furthest parking spot away that they can and then walk uncomfortably in their least favorite clothes that they wore into their office. Nobody does that. You don't do any of that. And you're just making little choices throughout the day. Every little choice that you make is a feel good strategy that you're trying to probably pick the thing that makes you feel better than some alternative. Um, because everything you do makes sense. Everything you do has a reason, and the reason might be tiny, and the reason might be big. And so kids literally don't have the power to be allowed to do a lot of that without it being policed, it being negated, it being not allowed for some reason, in the way that adults can just do this constantly with like it. Even calling it strategies makes it sound too big because it's just the flow of your life.
Yeah.
But kids get run into bumps a lot with the exact same things. Like they're like, I wanted that cup. Well, that cup is dirty and it's in the dishwasher. You get what you get, okay, but if I mean, I've got my favorite cup, and if it's dirty, I like rinse it out and then I drink out of it because I want to drink out of
Honestly,
my favorite cup.
I was just going on with my husband because of, it's more, he gave me a dessert spoon to eat something. I'm like, that is so gross. That is so gross. It's more how that does not feel right in my mouth. And it's like, and he's like,
Right,
it's a spoon. And I'm like, no, 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 for this particular meal, I need this spoon. And so, and I it's more,
right.
I think, I honestly, Kelsey, it's more, you opened up a world of sensory language for me with your, it was a really simple post about proprioception and the three different the
Subtypes.
languages. And
Yeah.
honestly, I had never thought about it in languages. So now when I work with people, I ask them, what's your language, what's the child's language? And
Mm.
there was actually an early childhood center that I went into, and they were telling me that the children were OTT. And I went and I watched, and the children were jumping on the tables and they were spinning around. And I was like, this is really interesting. And they were all kept inside. And I'm like, really, really interesting, while all the nappies were freshened up. And I'm like, this is interesting. Then they opened up the doors. And I watched the children get onto the trikes and crash into the wall. I watched the children that were running. So I watched all the different languages of the proprioception that the
Yeah.
children were doing naturally, and I timed it, and it was 15 minutes, and then we had calm. And I'm like, those children, they knew the children that needed to smash into the walls were smashing into the walls with the trike, and they need that jarring. And the children that need to run were actually running. And I watched them all, and I'm literally going, I've got all these teachers telling me how diabolical these children are. And I'm like, you just do not understand the language these children are trying to tell you. And it was
Yeah.
only after that post, I don't know if you can talk into it, but it was only after that post that I was like, we need to talk about this language, and we need to start looking at what people need. So I know with me, it's more, I'm a huggy person, and it's more,
Yeah.
when I'm dysregulated, I need a hug. But I also know there's times when I don't. But it's a language that I have now. It's a language that I actually want this
Uh-huh.
voice, and then sometimes I don't want it, but it gives me a way to actually speak to others about how I manage. And so Kelsey, what I'm going to be doing in, I think the start of July, is I'm taking people through how to create their maintenance plans. And one of the things I put into it is actually your work about, and again, I clearly say this is your work on the proprioception, because it has been a game changer for so many parents that I've worked with.
Yeah.
A real game changer. And I'm very much, I like to say to people where I get the information from.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk into that? Because this is your
I would
work.
love to. That is the book that I'm trying to write right now.
I
So
want to buy that book. So I want
I'll
to
get
buy it.
there. I have so many things on that it's hard to find time to write, but it's like burning a hole in me. So so what you're describing, for somebody who is coming from absolute nothing about this, hasn't heard the word proprioception before. So you probably learned about five senses, like sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, and then there are other senses that our body has as well. Um, And so when people talk about sensory processing, or if you've ever heard anybody say sensory processing disorder or things like that, people are talking about those five senses plus also some bonus senses. And one of the senses is proprioception. And so where proprioception is a sense that's located in your body, but like if I was to like rub your arm or your hand, then you would feel that with your sense of touch. That what that is nerves that are specialized, that are located in your skin. And when something touches them, those nerves in your skin carry a message to your brain to tell it, something is touching me, or I'm touching something, or whatever it is. Well, so if I was to squeeze your hand instead, then you would feel that you would feel me touching your skin, yes, but you would also feel a deeper sense of squeeze that's coming from your muscles and your joints, nerves that are located in your muscles and your joints and carrying a message to your brain. And that message is part of what makes up proprioception, your sense of proprioception. What it is your brain's like ability to make a mental map of your body in space. So I can close my eyes and still touch my nose because I have a sense of where my nose is at, where my arms are, how long my fingers are, how all my joints work in relation to each other. And my sense of proprioception makes that mental map of my body. And it's a constantly shifting map as I shift position, as I walk around, or as I'm walking and there's an object on the floor and I go to step over it, or things like that. And so it's a very dynamic sense that's constantly pulling info from my muscles and joints all over my body. Um, and it also can kind of like run in the background sometimes. So up until I talk about it, you're probably not thinking very much about the feeling of the couch or seat or whatever pressed against your backside and your legs up until you think about it, because your brain had that information about where you were at, how you were seated, how you were positioned, but it was just kind of running it under the conscious level, on the subconscious level. So all of that has to do with kind of the physical element of proprioception. And I divide proprioception input into three categories that are categories that I made up. So I always say if there's some
And it's
researcher who knows
so good.
something, but
It's so honestly, you changed how I worked with people when I read that. It's so clever, so freaking clever.
so sometimes you might hear somebody talk about it online as heavy work. That's a word that I
Mm-hmm.
hear kind of used
Yeah.
in popular spheres when they're trying to explain sensory processing stuff. And heavy work tends to correlate with the exertion subcategory of proprioception. The three categories are exertion, impact, and pressure. Um, and exertion is like anything that is exerting your muscles. So pushing something, pulling something, climbing up something, hanging from a bar, um, uh, like pushing something heavy, throwing something, anything where you're literally like lifting, exerting, like stuff that you think of like tensing your muscles and clenching them. All of that is exertion. Then impact is any part of your body hitting against something else. So that could be things like punching and kicking, but that could also be things like clapping or playing the drums, or um, crashing your whole body into a crash pad or the couch or the mattress or whatever, or jumping on a trampoline. All of those things give you impact proprioception. And then pressure is kind of the slow motion proprioception. Pressure is like squeeze, weight. When you talk about weighted blankets, that's another one that's kind of made its way into the popular sphere. Weighted blankets are, like thought to be helpful or whatever because of giving you pressure proprioceptive feedback. Or weighted vests is a thing that you hear a lot in OT, or uh, wrapping yourself up in blankets, or your pet laying on top of you, or someone you love giving you a really tight squeezy hug.
So I
um
know I drive my husband mad because to sleep I need a heavy duvet on me. And in the middle
yeah,
I can't sleep without some kind of duvet. And in New Zealand, in the middle of summer, I drive him mad because I insist on still having that weight. But I've after learning from you, I was like, that's what it is. Okay, I need that pressure to sleep. And I'm like, got it. All right. It's more, this is my language. It's more, and it's so
yep,
rather than going just sleep without with the sheet on, I'm like, I can't. Actually, my body, I can't. And I'd rather be sweltering, so sleeping, because
right,
because otherwise I'm not going to sleep. So, but
Right.
you gave me a language to actually say to him, going, yeah,
Yeah.
your body works different to mine.
Right. Yep. Yep. I like to sleep with a lot of blankets piled on and a fan pointed at me so that I've got I'm
I
cooled off
hadn't
and
thought
I'm
of the
covered.
fan. I must put the fan
Yep.
into my room.
Um so then we've got the three different proprioceptive categories. I believe, again, this is kind of a lot of observation, intuition stuff, and it's not like I am kind of researching right now, but also kind of describing things that I see, but I don't have like a study to point to yet or anything like that. But it's all very like none of it is very
But
harmful. So if if you
but
try something and it doesn't work, then no
but
harm
you
done.
don't need to. It's more just through observation. Honestly,
Yeah,
I have supported so many people just through the observation of what
right.
way. So we don't need a study because the children tell us.
So I have seen people I believe that people have a like a preferred proprioceptive sensory input that would be their default. And that could be a whole category and it could also be kind of a specific thing within that category. And if people are struggling to identify which one theirs is, and they about themselves or about their kid or whatever it is, then I typically do go to the toddler phase. Like, what did this person do when they were a toddler and they were mad? Because I feel like some people have always kind of been screamers. Some people are hitters or kickers. Some people are spitters. Some people are throwers. Like what did they do when they were a toddler and they were mad? Because toddlers don't have a lot of concern for like social propriety or like dignity or like any of the other confounding factors that a grown up might have in the way or even a big kid might have in the way. They're kind of just acting on pure driven instinct for what feels right inside of their body. And so if it's hard to tell what somebody bigger would use, then sometimes you can go littler.
So I'm just thinking as you're saying that, sorry, just I've literally had a light bulb moment because it was one of the questions I had was, do people have this actual language, which you said yes. And then I'm thinking about the toddler because that's where I work. I work with young children under 6. That's my forte. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going, the neuro pathways of this feel safe, the what's actually creating when they do something, and this is actually my body feels safe with this, that they're actually creating that unique language themselves through what actually happens to them. So again, I'm just thinking about those the children that I watched in that 2-year-old room. And once the door was opened, I watched them all literally race out and they all did different things. But I watched over 15 minutes, I watched them all find regulation. The teachers couldn't
Mm-hmm.
see they were finding regulation, but I could see that. And I could see that
Yeah.
there were some of the children that, again, the ones crashing into the wall, literally, this place was amazing because it had this steep hill. And I saw these children at the top of the hill putting their feet up and they went straight down because they knew they were going to get impact at the bottom. And I watched them
Right.
going, look at you, look at you. You know what you need. You know what your body needs. And it actually looked like all the children were crazy. But I was like, no, you are regulating. It's more, you
Right.
are regulating here. And so with what you're saying, I'm like going, and then because they've had that environment, they take that environment into later life with them because my body felt good when I did this. So I'm just thinking
Right.
from my own perspective, maybe my body felt good earlier on with the pressure, which is why as I've grown, there's certain things that
Mm-hmm.
I've developed of actually who I am, and why
Right.
finding sleep is easier. And I remember again, so again, I'm burbling here, but I remember with my mum, and my mum used to, and I used to call it a hug bed, but she used to
Mm-hmm.
create a hug bed for me. And so she literally, I would get tucked in so I couldn't move. And I loved it. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And my own children, and I think my mum used to say that it was more when she couldn't be with me that the sheets would be hugging me. And
Oh.
so I have done this with my own children, and my children love it when they have a hug bed. So usually straight after the washing, it's more you make a really tight bed and we called it a hug bed. But I can see it now in the language of proprioception. And for me,
Yeah.
this is a memory of the heart for me, because it also connects me back to my mum.
Yeah, that's so lovely.
So, so
I love that.
total tangent there, sorry. So,
No, it's so sweet. No, but so people can I feel like people have their own preferred one, but people can use other ones too, because it's not like you can only use the one that's your preference or whatever. But the preference is helpful when you're trying to find a replacement
mhm,
that meets the same need but doesn't do something that the preferred one has a problem. Like if your preferred proprioception is impact, so every time you're mad you punch your mom. Well, okay, there's an element to that that's not working for everybody, right? Because it's not working for mom to just get punched every time you're mad. And so that means that if you know that their preferred is impact, then you can look within the impact category for a replacement
yeah,
that will make sense. Now, a lot of times people will do something like punch a punching bag or punch a pillow, and those might help. Those do help with some kids, and then other kids, those don't help. They don't meet some part of it that was helpful, and so you can look at other impact things. There could be a kid for whom their default is punch your mom, and so the replacement is jump up and down really hard. And that wouldn't be, if you were only thinking only punch, you wouldn't see how you got there. But if you're broadening it out to impact, then you
yeah.
might see how you got there. And so that's
And,
why I
and
feel the bigger
yeah,
category is helpful.
and this is exactly where I've gone through that simple little picture that you put up. Honestly, it's more, I've gone in and I've done exactly that. As I'm listening to you, I've come back again to everything makes sense, because this,
Yes.
so literally I look with different lenses. So I might look, is there communication under this? But I also now look, is there proprioception that's actually coming from this? And so I look with different lenses. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm writing notes and I'm like, yep, this is why everything makes sense. But you have to actually look
Exactly.
to see what the sense is. So it's not always, it's not always like a wound or a communication or a need. Sometimes, well, it is a
No.
need, but it's actually a proprioception need. It's actually a self-led
Yeah.
need. And
Yes, and so then the other thing that you can do if you know somebody's preferred proprioception is that you can meet that category preemptively throughout the day so that they don't need it when they're at the brink of dysregulation or the brink of crisis. But instead, you're like meeting it throughout the day in advance,
yeah,
just like the same thing I was saying with feel good strategies. So if somebody punches their parent when they're upset, then before they ever even get to the brink of crisis, you can be doing impact activities throughout the day to meet some of that need and take some of that back off before they even get there. So, jumping on the trampoline, that's going to be impacting your feet. Playing a game with a drum, or I've joked before that our OT clinic should just have a really big gong in it with just like a really big mallet, and you can just ring the big gong, because I feel like that would be such a good impact reception. Crashing into stuff, jumping around on the
yeah,
blankets on your couch or on your mattress, or what I do with my kids a lot is because I want less. I'm pretty sensory avoidant and pretty sensory sensitive, and I want less of it for me. But I'll sit on the couch and throw pillows at them across the room, and then they like both get the impact of the pillow, and then they can like be super dramatic and flop around on the floor, and then they're like adding more and more and more and more impact and exertion and pressure, and I don't have to be the one doing the wrestling because they're like wrestling themselves but with a pillow, um
so this
but
this is
getting that
really
impact that they're craving.
this is really really interesting, because I have just been talking to someone, and we've been trying to unravel this, because we're looking at the sensory needs of the mum and the daughter, and we're also working with the window of tolerance, and we're working with at the meal table. So she's got a an elastic band thing for around her chair, but when she's kicking at it, it makes too much noise, and it's actually impacting
Oh,
on mum's noise sensitivity. And so we were literally just laughing, going, oh, look at the two of you, it's more. And I bet this actually, both of you get dysregulated when you're at the top of your window of tolerance. And so we've been working with all right, let's actually look at both your needs, because it's an interplay between the two of you. It's more
Yeah.
what works for the child, what works for the child using the band doesn't work for the mum when she's been working all day, and she's literally, the last bit of noise is not
Yeah.
going to work for her. So we've been working with the relationship, going, you both have needs. All right, so let's look at the sensory world of both of you for both of your needs. And it's more, honestly, but this is only unraveled from what I've learned from you. It's more because I wasn't even seeing this. It was not even on my horizon until, and
Yeah.
it's so simple. You need to write this book. You frigging need to write this book, because
I'm working on it.
no, but honestly, there's so many children that are classed as misbehavior, and it's sensory needs,
Yeah.
and it's self-regulation, and for me, this is why
Right.
I've left early child education, because it's like, it's loud and it's big, and these children are like an all-day party all the time. And then there's certain children that are then starting to get this reputation of being the villains of the world, where actually they're not.
Right.
They're not, because they can't escape this environment that we're placing them in. And then what we're doing is their nervous system is getting fried, because no one can see what we're doing because of the environments that we're creating.
Right.
And this is how important this work is on that. And this is why I reached out to you, because I'm like, I want people to hear, I want people to hear your theories, because if we can get this, if we can change the view. And I'm going to lead in, because then the next thing that I loved about your work was you created this chart, of all the, so if you were in an education environment, and this is your work, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's like it's a
Yeah.
masterclass of, if you don't know where to start, then you've
Yeah.
given like 7 things of actually leading into this really inclusive environment. How did
Yeah.
you even come up with that?
I don't remember how I came up with it, other than that I just wanted to. So you're describing baby steps, which is a like a poster for
So
a classroom or for a.
yeah, so it's a poster. And so again, I found this because I had a family in one of my classes, and their son was struggling in school, and they were exasperated because their son was being described as the bully, the villain, as the bully. It's more, and I was like, I could really see these sensory needs, but obviously the school, that wasn't the lens, that wasn't the glasses that they had on. And so this particular child was constantly being sent home because of big behavior. And this kid is a good kid who just has sensory needs. And so I found this chart that you've got, because his parents were exasperated of how they could just help the school to see these baby steps. And so I found it, and I gave the parents your chart, so they could take your
Mhm.
chart into the school to start
Yeah.
somewhere to make this child's life more bearable. And like, actually,
Right.
the dad was telling me, and again, sorry, I know but the dad was telling me his best year of school. This dad made everyone cry, because he was saying that he had experienced the same world as what his son was now experiencing. And his best year of school ever was where the teacher made him a box. And he sat in the classroom with this box that shut out all the sensory overload that was going on. He didn't get sent to the principal. He wasn't in detention. He said it was the best year of life for him at the school, because this teacher had made him a box that he could sit in. And it's more, and so all of us were like, and he was just telling us, because we were like going, that's really barbaric, that's cool. He's like, no, the box was the best thing ever. He said, I got my life back. Literally, I could join in with school because I was in the box. What do you think about that?
There've got to be better ways to do it in 2025, but I
I know,
do
I
appreciate
know.
the concept of the people who kind of pioneered stuff before they could hop on the internet and try to figure out anything, you know. Um, but yes, so what you're describing is a poster called Baby Steps that across the top it talks about like a really really old school paradigm, and it's like one long sentence that's broken into bubbles, and it's to the effect of, you know, kids will sit still and listen while the adult teaches them the thing, and then the kids will, you know, sit still and write at their desk while the, you know, the thing that's in response, or else they'll be in trouble. Um, and it's broken into little, like each 3 or 2 word chunk of that is broken into a different bubble. So like kids at desks is the first bubble, and then, you know, like sit quietly is a bubble, and then going down from each bubble, it goes in incremental steps of how you could get to a freer, more inclusive classroom. And the goal would not be to say every classroom in the world should be at the very very bottom of the chart in order to be good. Like that wouldn't even be accurate or appropriate, because what I wanted was for it to be able to apply whether you are teaching, you know, for disabled preschoolers in a specialist classroom, or 38th graders who are learning about history, or any classroom of any size, of anything, could look at this chart, identify themselves in one spot, and take one step down. That would be the point of the chart. And so it's not to say everybody needs to be, you know, everybody's along the top and they're all bad and they all need to make 50 steps to get along the bottom. That's not at all the point. The point is to identify, okay, in this line, I'm actually on the 4th step down. So that's seems like where I want to be. But in this line, I'm on the top step. I would like to be one more down. Like whatever it is that actually feels like authentic for an educator. Because what I hear so often when I post anything about schools or teachers, more than anything else that I post, is that it gets taken as an attack on teachers, or that I personally hate teachers or hate public schools or hate the system or anything like that. And I'm like, I work in public schools. I love public schools. I want public schools to be good and safe. That's why I keep writing things about them. I'm not just like, pull your kids out and homeschool. I'm like, I want to keep improving these. And so it was my attempt at creating a resource that was both comprehensive enough for any teacher anywhere to find something that they could do that was a baby step. And also just like making it clear that there are lots and lots of, like, within a window of right ways to do school, that there are lots and lots and lots of ones that would fit within that paradigm. But that there's still like always a way that we could be taking a little step forward to making our kids freer. And it doesn't mean that we have to just like go out and do a revolution and overhaul the whole system before we can do anything at all.
So with your poster, do you sell your poster?
I don't, but people could print it if they had access
So I
to that.
suppose that's what I
Because
wanted. I'm very conscious. This is your ideas, and I'm very
it's a
conscious
big
that
PDF on my website, and so someone could download it easily and print it, and that would be fine.
okay, but that's what I, because again I really feel that we should acknowledge people that are thinking outside of the box. So it's like because yeah, those baby steps and that's starting somewhere, and that chart is it's incredible, honestly. Like so much of the stuff that you do is actually incredible. It's like where your mind must go to create all this stuff, because yeah, like I say, I'm like giddy because I'm like, oh, you're coming on to talk to me because you have changed the lives of so many people that I've worked with, because I've understood. I've literally watched. I'm a great observer, and I watch, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's that. I can see exactly what you're talking about. I can see it, and it makes sense. And I've put down the word self-reg here. Why have I put down the word self-reg? It will come back to me because there was a place I was going with the poster. Um, let's see whether that thought comes back to me.
Yeah.
What So again, what would you say? So again, that family where the dad was in the box,
Oh
and
yeah, I'm
the,
sorry. I didn't even circle back to that. I just described the poster. Um so I do have a talk on my website also where and it's just there, it's for free, and it's about creating calming sensory spaces in your classroom. Um and I think that that's something that's really again kind of like a lot of stuff bleeds from OT into like pop science in the, larger sphere, like every other type of science does too. Something gets popular and gets hung on to, and I feel like having a calm down corner in your classroom has become like that from OT. And so everybody's got some part of their classroom where they've got like an emotion poster and maybe like a fidget and maybe like a pillow, and so like if you're, the dad who you worked with was a kid in 2025, that might be what he would have encountered with the teacher trying to find something that would help him. um and
So
one
so
thing to note is that might have been like that might have missed the whole boat on reducing the visual overload if he was supposed to go like sit in a corner that has like 12 posters taped to it about how to do yoga poses and how to identify your emotion, and they're all like rainbow colors, then that's like even more visual overload.
So what you were saying there, because again, honestly, I'm laughing because I worked with a little boy. So this little boy that was biting, and so it took me 9 months to pull back all the different layers of hidden stress that was happening for him. But I remember the teachers going, "Come down corner, come down corner," and I'm like, "Actually, have you watched him? He actually, it literally, if we put it, if he was actually in the calm down corner, it would have been the most hell-like place for him to be. Actually, where he needed to be was outside, usually throwing stuff. I was a really good way of actually, I missed all the targets of him throwing things at me, but it was actually about him being outside, jumping around, and he needed that because he needed to move. So if you try to get him to sit, and then what would always happen is literally he would do all of this stuff, and then the pattern that would always happen was because there was so much stress going on in his little body, and then he would burst out crying, and that's when he would come and find me. And because I'd be there the whole time with him, and then he'd come and find me. He'd be on my lap, and he's like, "I want my mummy," and I know, and I said, "I know you want your mummy. I know you do, and I'm here. I'm not your mummy. I can't give you cuddles like your mummy, but I can give them the next best." This child was the sweetest, cuddliest, most beautiful child that was so misunderstood for his relationship with stress. Have you worked
Right.
with other children like him, and what other things have you done for children like him?
Yes, so definitely with kids who's like I just had a post real recently that like if there were two kids in a classroom and one of them um puts their head down quietly on their desk and cries silently, then like they might be comforted, the adult might come to see what's wrong. Also, people pointed out they might be missed, or they might, depending on how big the classroom is. But if a kid sought out an adult for help and they were crying and they were saying that they were sad and tears were rolling down their face, an adult would usually probably try to help them. And if another kid was also feeling the saddest that they'd ever felt, and so they raged and threw stuff and broke things and flipped a table, then they would be punished and have consequences and be pushed further away and less connection and ostracized more from the classroom and all of those types of things. And both of the kids might have been feeling sadness, and it's just that one of their reactions to sadness is sympathetic to adults and the other one reactions to sadness is infuriating to adults. um and somebody commented on it when I shared it last year and talked about their child whose dad had died this school year. Their little child who's like 6, and their dad had died, and they were being suspended repeatedly for doing angry things in the classroom, and they were like, his dad died like this month, like of course he's doing angry things in the classroom. He's angry at the world and everything, like how can you not see that this is the level of stress that he's under? And so yes, I've had many families who I've worked with where um going back to the proprioceptive categories, a lot of times exertion and impact are high energy proprioceptive sensory input, and pressure is a low energy proprioceptive sensory input. Tend to be. It's kind of hard to get somebody to like give you big cuddly squeezes in a super high energy way, and it's kind of hard to like punch a punching bag or flip a heavy thing in like a low energy and slow motion way. Those tend to be higher energy and lower energy things, and so often but not always exertion and impact go with high energy emotions, and often but not always pressure goes with lower energy emotions. And so kids whose dysregulation expresses itself as sadness will tend to be floppy, drapey, clingy, tearful, curl up in your lap because they're seeking pressure. And then kids whose dysregulation tends to manifest itself as anxiety or as anger, both of which are high energy emotions, or as I call it silly dysregulated because I don't have a better word for it. Not silly in a way that's having fun, but like silly in a way that's almost like a little bit manic, kind of, like laughter that isn't really enjoying this laughter, and like playing and being silly in a way that isn't really enjoying this silly. But silly, dysregulated, and angry and fearful or anxious are high energy emotions and will tend to express themselves with high energy proprioception. And so if a kid reaches for that when they're starting to get dysregulated, then they're more likely to be in trouble or misunderstood, or their adults be mad at them, because exertion and impact as higher energy proprioceptive things are less convenient in a lot of spheres that kids have to go in. And if they're less convenient, then that means that they're bad, and that means that they'll get you in trouble, and that means all of the, when what it really actually just means is they are less convenient in a room full of 30 people. And so if you have to navigate that space all the time, then the thing that you instinctively reach for when you're dysregulated is inconvenient to the setting that you've been placed in. And so now it's bad, now we've moralized it, now all these kinds of things that like follow from that, when it literally just had to do with the way that the energy manifests in your body when you are dysregulated.
And I wish we could have more of a conversation on this. Um, Again, I suppose personally with me, when we think of fight, flight, freeze, or flop, it's more like the children that have these big behaviors. I can identify with them because that's the way that my body goes. My body goes to the fight sometimes. And so for me, it's easier for me to be able to be with these children when they are looking scary, because I can sort of identify where they're going. But for a lot of parents and teachers, the going into the fight can actually be scary for them, so that the anger can actually bring up wounds from the past for them. And I'm going down, oh gosh, a rabbit hole now. um, but I think there's also a language of the nervous system. There's a language of that just because you go into fight or go into flight, sometimes it can actually start from the same place. It's just how your body has learnt to get you probably down rigged again. Am I making
Yep.
any sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. That's the core of all of it, is that so many of these things are just linked into everything we do. Makes sense that they're linked to this thing in our body that is the way that humans regulate themselves again, and it makes sense for us to reach for that. It doesn't have like all of the moral undertones are things that are, imposed on top of that, or have to do with the fact that we're in, you have to consider other people's needs in a society, or whatever. And so like, yes, by adulthood you want to have figured out how to do these things in ways that they're not impacting other people. But in 3-year-olds, like, they're not fully integrated into everything societal, everything moral yet. And so like, it's just a learning process, and no one's ever like furthered a learning process by stomping out it at its smallest and at its source. You further a learning process by building on what's already there, not by destroying what's already there.
So I've got a
And so what's already there is the like instinctual, react according to my body's proprioceptive needs, and that's all I know about how to build on that. Then starting from that and being like, okay, yeah, it makes sense that you want to hit me when you're mad. I totally
so
get it. Bodies have a lot of energy in them and they want to get it out some way when they're mad. Makes sense that you want to hit me. Let's find a different way to do that.
so now I've now got my early childhood teacher hat on, and I'm thinking about, so again, the spaces that we work on is really important, and creating havens of that are less agitating to the nervous system. Now, if an early childhood centre created a haven space, would this have an impact on how the child actually unfolds later on in more stressful spaces if they've actually had lesser stressful spaces earlier on in their lives as their nervous system is developing? Or does it not matter?
I mean, there's so many factors that go into like creating a human that it's hard to know, what will and won't be. What's a formative core memory thing for one kid is like a thing they totally forgot about their preschool for another kid, but I do believe that it has a profound impact to have a grown up acknowledge that what you're doing makes sense, that there's a reason behind it. Um, because it means that no matter what you encounter later on in terms of grown-ups assuming the worst of you, thinking it's bad behavior, thinking whatever, that you always grow up with parallel tracks of interpretation for what it is that you're doing. And I grew up with literally only one interpretation track for everything that I was doing, and then I had to relearn all of it when I was in my 20s, because the only interpretation track that I had for everything was like really rooted in religion and sin and evil, and no other thing. I really didn't even have a concept that any other thing existed, let alone to decide whether I thought the thing that I was being raised with was right or wrong. But like I didn't even really have a concept outside of that of anything else existing. And I do earnestly believe that it would have made a profound impact to even think, even if I thought that they were wrong. But if I thought, oh yeah, like my occupational therapist said that this is because of this, but my mom and dad say that this is because of this, I think the OT is wrong. But for me to even have more than one track that I could decide from would
Yeah.
still have given me the language to believe that it was an interpretation or a worldview, instead of just that it was literally objective truth and there's no questioning it whatsoever. And and so I think that if you set up a spot in your early childhood classroom where you've got a big bin of paper that would just be like trash or recyclables anyway, so it's just scrap paper, and you have made it apparent to kids that if they're feeling frustrated, it is totally fine to go over to this bin of paper and pick the papers up and rip them up into little pieces, because when our bodies are mad, it makes sense that that energy wants to get out of our bodies somehow, and ripping stuff up into little pieces is a really great way to feel like you get to move all of that mad energy out of your body through your hands, and then later you clean up the confetti or whatever it is. Because that's really the only downside of ripping up paper, is that now there's paper on the floor. And so, okay, cool, we can circle back and clean it up later. If you taught that to all your 4-year-olds, which is something that I have done, then maybe when they're, 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, they're not in a setting like that anymore. You don't have control over it anymore because you only knew them in the preschool. And who knows, maybe they do still have other angry behaviors. Maybe they do still want to punch stuff when they're mad, or maybe they do still, whatever, swear or do something that they're not supposed to and they're getting in trouble for it. But living somewhere in their body is the knowledge that it does help my body when I rip up a paper when I'm mad about it, or when I rip up something when I'm mad about it. And maybe they encounter an adult who's still mad about that. Maybe they get mad at their homework and they want to flip their table over in their class, but instead they just rip up their homework. And then the teacher still gets mad at them about it. Like, because we're talking about, it was a great situation when they were 4 and now it's not when they're older. But they still didn't hurt anybody in that scenario. They still actually didn't. Even if the teacher gets mad at them, or even if they get in trouble or whatever, they have still just experienced the process of, like, I was taught a way to manage this, and I managed it, and nobody was hurt. And so, like, later on could reinforce that or de-reinforce that, or make it better or make it worse or whatever it is. But, like, you've laid the groundwork for that. And so whatever, maybe when they're 8 they tear up their homework and their teacher's like, don't tear up homework, that's bad, you're a bad kid. And then they stop relying on that strategy. But then later they're 20 years old and they're like, no, actually, I do think that was a good strategy. I'm going to go back to that, because when I rip something up, then that actually does get the anger out of me in a pretty reasonable way. And I don't need to scream at my girlfriend or whatever the other thing that I would have done now, because now I'm 20 and I've got years and years of messaging about what the, like, right thing is, or what the, like, societally accepted thing is. And I've got this groundwork laid from back when I was a little kid, and I can go back to that. I've known about this my whole life. I've understood that this is mad energy trying to leave my body my whole life.
And I think, yeah, this all weaves in, and I think this is what I'm trying to create with the golden thread, because all of this stuff weaves in, because I've sort of changed in the last 6 months to work in with attachment wounds. And the attachment wounds come from when you're getting that negativity and that repetition. And it's then one, the wound of I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, there's something bad. And and the children can't tell us when they're younger, where I'm working now with 20, 30, 40-year-olds that are trying to unravel their past. And I suppose what I'm trying to do is create a link for people to see how important the early years are, because
Mhm.
of the messaging that children get, because their bodies are learning to feel safe. We're learning to create pathways of safety rather than fear. We're trying to create pathways of appropriately managing stress and not managing stress. But the children can't tell us that now, but the adults tell us when they're older. And so again, I suppose my my frustration, and what I'm going to write my book on, is the bridge between the two, because I see it, because I work both ends now, and I see this, and it's more, you are just one incredibly important part of the many lenses that are going in to creating these core wounds that children live their lives with, and think is their personality, which it's not.
Right.
um so again, I'm just going to leave that there, because that's my book. um there's one thing, Kelsey, as well, it's more, I went to support a team, and I was supported an early childhood team to understand about self-reg. And there was actually a primary school teacher there, and she was like, this is really interesting to hear. And she's like, the children that have the biggest behaviors, they get the strategies in the classrooms for self-reg. But she says, I'm a primary school teacher, and she says, I watch other children and they're going, why can't I have this? Why can't I have the swivel chair, or the tent, or I'm not making these, there's children going, I'm not making these big behaviors, but I'm not getting the strategies. What would you say to a primary school teacher that has this thought?
I mean, I would say, like, yeah, they're right.
Yeah, no, I
Why
know.
aren't they?
I know. I just need someone else to say this.
Yeah. So I encountered this line of thinking a lot, where it's like, how do I explain to the kids that, that only the identified autistic student needs fidgets, and everybody else shouldn't just get one because they look cool. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, I am the wrong answer to that, because I actually would give them to everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
so would I.
I think that we should have, like, oh, well, how come only they get to sit somewhere else than in their chair? Oh, yeah, I don't know. I think everybody should be able to sit wherever they want to. I think that everybody should be able to sit in whatever kind of seating helps them learn best. I think that everybody should be able to write or present the information in a way that makes sense to their brain. And so if the teachers need some more support and how to make that look like it would work with 20 people instead of just with one, then like cool, I'm happy to consult on that. But a lot of times autistic kids and neurodivergent kids at large are often like the canary in the coal mines.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
if there's a a practice in childhood spheres or early childhood education or whatever it is that doesn't work for everybody, then the autistic kids are the canary. They're the ones who are going to look the most harmed first, and be the one who falls apart first, because the harmful practice or the lack of accommodation or whatever it is killing them first. But that doesn't mean that because the other kids haven't dropped from it yet, that it's good for the other kids. It just means that it hasn't built up to a level of toxicity yet where everybody has dropped from that and is falling apart. It just means that that's still on its way. And so looking at that situation and being like, okay, well, here's how we fix it. We take some of the pressure off of the autistic kid. We make some accommodations for them. And then we leave everybody else exactly how it is missing the point of that situation happening.
So again, you're talking my language. I used to be a learning disabilities nurse back in the UK, and my whole degree was about inclusiveness.
Mm.
And I've come to New Zealand, and I'm going, oh, so children have to change to fit in? That's not how I was trained. And so I've been here for 23 years and have struggled with something that we were doing back in the UK, yeah, 23 years ago. And that was my whole degree was how do we make life inclusive. So, and
Mm.
again, I think that's why I've been so drawn to your work, because it fits what I believe in. Kelsey, I'm going to start wrapping this up because yeah, we've been going for a while. How do
Yeah.
people work with you, and what do you do? So if I've got a mum in this group that goes, this is the woman I want to work with, how does she do it, or how does the dad do it?
There is not, unless you're living in Australia, I don't think that people are allowed to get direct OT services from me. If you are living in Australia, then you can contact Amazing Kids OT, which is with the company that I work for. Um, but there is a wait list at this point.
Yeah.
If people are just interested, I mean, everything else in maybe 95% of everything I do, I give away. Um,
You're an
so
incredible person, incredible.
I've got my website, occupational.com. It doesn't get updated a lot anymore, but it has quite a lot of backlog of my writing. And all the other times I've been on podcasts and stuff. So if you're more of an auditory person, then it's got that. If you use social media, I am the occupational therapist on Facebook, on Instagram. If you use Substack, I have a Substack. Um, I've got a book called Your Child's Point of View, and it's got an ebook now too. So it's got both a paperback and a ebook, and that's very practical of a book. Each like page is its own adult concern, and then the next page is a new one. So all you have to do is open it and read one page in order to get something out of it, and then you can close it and pick it back up again when you have time or when you want to. So it's made to be able to be read in 5-minute chunks and not take a big portion of your time. um um I've got different video trainings online, and you can find links to them on my website. I've got a couple that are paid and a lot that are free. The ones that are paid are $5, and so they're US dollars, but still not a whole lot,
That's
hopefully.
so cheap. So
um and yeah, just lots of resources scattered across the internet.
no,
But that's pretty much where you can find me. I'm not doing a lot of I'm not doing any one-on-one consultation right now, but maybe someday in the future. I do trainings for like a company. So if you have a company who wants to hire me, feel free to email or whatever. But other
Oh,
than that,
I am going to be singing your. It's more. I always knew this was going to be an exciting conversation for me personally because I was slightly worried that I'd interpreted your work wrong, but I haven't. Everything I've seen on your page, I've interpreted exactly how you've explained it today. And I'm like, and I know the impact it's had out there. And my impact is only a small amount. But you are a truly, truly amazing human being. And I think that's part of what I want to do on the Golden Thread is I want to celebrate these amazing human beings like yourself because you are changing the trajectory of so many children and parents. I think you're changing the trajectory of parents as well because you're creating safety for them where up until now there's not been a lot of safety in the professional. When we get too professional, I think it can
yeah,
sometimes stop safety. And that's what
yeah,
I love about your work. And so I am literally going to just I want you to feel how much I appreciate you and that
thank you.
how frigging a crazily amazing that you are. And I really, really hope, like I say, I will send you the links to the other people that I've got on here because I really feel that there's a whole load in Australia as well that you need to meet up because you're doing incredible work and working from your different lenses. We are going to change the world. I really truly
I hope
feel
so.
I really truly feel because that's my tiny part of my mission is to connect
Yeah.
amazing people. So I'm going to stop recording here,
Okay.
and so I can just say goodbye to you privately. So let me just do that.